Ryusuke Hamaguchi's Happy Hour premiered in Japan on December 12, 2015, and although it was received critically on the film festival circuit, it wouldn't really make a tour internationally. And this isn't exactly uncommon. Distributors don't pick up everything, right? And we're over 5 years out from Hamaguchi getting insane levels of international acclaim with Drive My Car. But Happy Hour did come to America in a limited capacity. It just wasn't shown in any movie theaters. There was actually a short series of screenings in the New York Museum of Modern Art. As for why it was in the MoMA and not traditional theaters, that's because Happy Hour is over 5 hours long. And to be clear, there's a difference. There are long movies, like Bergman's Scenes from a Marriage or Lynch's Twin Peaks: The Return, where they're designed as a short series and then retroactively kind of regarded as film by their audience. There are those types of long movies, and then there are real long movies. And what I'm talking about is one of those. Happy Hour is a 5 hour and 17-minute feature film.
The Offering.
Hey, I'm doing something a little different. I guess it's like a sub-series. Maybe not that. That sounds a little self-important. It's a project. Let's call it a project. I'm doing a project. It's a kind of thing I want to do. Hopefully it's as interesting or as fulfilling for you as it is for me. What I want to do is kind of comb through the filmography of Ryusuke Hamaguchi, and I did something similar to this with my first Lane video, although this time I really want to provide enough space and time to flesh out those ideas into something more real, I guess. I think his work has enough in it to spend a lot of time digging out meanings and interesting ideas. This isn't going to be a series of reviews. In case you haven't noticed, I don't really do like reviews. They're not going to be reviews. They're not going to really be separate works of analysis. What I'm trying to kind of look at is how all these movies connect and sort of bounce off each other. To start, let's build the baseline. The one thing all of Hamaguchi's movies have in common are that he wrote and directed them, right? So if you don't know, Ryusuke Hamaguchi is a Japanese film director who, although he had been working as a director since the early 2000s, really made a name for himself with a series of documentaries focusing on the victims of the Tohoku earthquake and tsunami of 2011. Remember that. Remember those documentaries. They're important. Following the release of those documentaries, Hamaguchi took up a position as artist in residence at the Design and Creative Center of Kobe, from where he planned and filmed Happy Hour. With Happy Hour's success came more opportunities to direct and write than Blink and Drive My Car's playing in theaters around the world. Happy Hour was conceived as a project that's cast was composed almost entirely of non-actors. Hamaguchi, as artist in residence at the Design and Creative Center of Kobe, held a workshop, the Ryusuke Hamaguchi Improvisational Acting Workshop in Kobe, that's a translation, in which over the course of 5 months Hamaguchi worked with non-actors in order to develop a foundation for acting, and then those participants would be cast in an upcoming film, which turned into Happy Hour. A lot of the main cast, including our 4 main characters, were a part of that workshop. As for the runtime, originally the film was only going to be about 2 hours long, but you know, projects evolve, and in order to complete the film, Hamaguchi crowdfunded enough of a budget to shoot the entire 5-hour picture. This is kind of the first of a ton of different themes and ideas that appear and reappear in this series of movies. Hamaguchi almost always is thinking about format when he makes his films, and specifically bending the rules of the format to better serve the story. This 5-hour movie is the first in a series of works that breaks down the idea that a movie has to be in a way. And in this case, especially the idea that a movie has a typical length. Not all of his films play in these boundaries as explicitly as Happy Hour, but this is an idea that Hamaguchi is clearly interested in. As a kind of warning, and I feel like I say this in every video, I'll be honest, I have a weird fixation on this every time I try to talk about something. The last thing I want is for someone to see me talking about something and go like, oh, I don't need to watch that now because I know all about it from what you told me. You know what I mean? So I'll say it here, and I'll probably say it forever, that this video isn't designed to be a supplement. I'm going to talk about this movie in a way that assumes you've already seen it, which means 1, I'm gonna spoil things, and 2, I'm gonna talk about them assuming you're familiar with them, so it might be hard to keep up with the video if you aren't. Yeah, so if you're waiting for the recommend, it's right here. Happy Hour is so good. I'm talking about it because I want you to see it, so stop watching the video, okay? Okay, now, for real.
何もわからんな。今なんか送ってました。
あ、てっきり風間さんが送ってんやと思って。
そうですよね。あれ、俺もどっちだったかなと思って。
伝わらんはずや。
Happy Hour's primary interest is exploring the intricacies and redundancies of interpersonal relationships. Our four main characters, all nearing 40, have their whole lives kind of propped up by the relationships they've established between each other and the romantic partners. Or in Akari's case, the lack of a romantic relationship serves as its own pillar. As the film begins to set up these characters, we're introduced to each of our protagonists' own respective worlds, with their own intricate and complicated relationships. But a prevailing aspect to all these relationships is a feeling of distance. Sakuriko's life is dominated by the pressures of societal roles, her being the housewife, and every member of her household being quarantined off in their own little box to the benefit of no one. With Fumi, her relationship is one of intense apathy and passivity. Akari explicitly keeps people around her at arm's distance, unable to trust anyone. And Jun's relationships are really complicated, but we only learn the details of it over the course of the entire movie. Relationships become a well that Hamaguchi will continue to come back to over and over. Almost all of his fiction work has a romantic relationship as a key component of his stories going forward. The film, as a sort of conclusion to exploring these romantic and platonic and familial relationships, shows how everyone, and this is the film saying this, I'm not necessarily agreeing or, but the idea that everyone is looking for real connection, understanding. This is all set up by the workshop that the protagonists attend. They, through these kind of silly team building exercises, and when I say silly, the movie kind of knows how silly they are. But through these exercises, they get this feeling of real, intimate, interpersonal connection. And then all of those feelings kind of break down. The people I thought I knew aren't who I thought they were. Who I thought I was isn't who I actually am. I feel like I'm capable of becoming a person I've always wanted to be. Some people understand me better than I understand myself. People who I've known my whole life are showing me new sides to them. People who I thought understood the world better than I could actually are just as lost as me. People who are younger and less experienced than me have a better perspective on my life than I do myself. Someone who I thought could never understand me actually can in a different circumstance. Isn't that hypocritical? I don't feel bad about the things I did, even though they hurt people. Why not? We are constantly surprising ourselves and others, and we're desperately trying to understand everything in our lives, or at least trying to maintain the situations and relationships that we feel like we understand. That's pretty much it, right? I could spend 5 hours talking about how each character maneuvers around the themes of the movie. Like Kohei, a complete enigma of a character, especially when paired with Jun, who is equally a mystery to the audience and the characters of the film. But the film has so much to say already. It's not hard to find so much to read in Happy Hour. I do want to talk about Ukai. So Ukai is a performance artist that became notable because of his work during the time he spent volunteering after the Tohoku earthquake. He then hosts a workshop in a creative space located in Kobe. Ukai even considers being an artist in residence at that creative space. You're connecting the wires, right? I don't think he's a complete stand-in for Hamaguchi, or he's supposed to be read as one. Hamaguchi's in the film, and he plays a completely different character. But more so, I'm teeing up the idea that the Tohoku earthquake and its repercussions will sort of continue to permeate in a lot of his work post-documentary series. There's such an obvious comparison to be made between the character and the filmmaker that you might think it's kind of odd that I zero in on the Tohoku earthquake over all the other similarities. But with his whole filmography in mind, this detail becomes much, much more interesting to look at. A last kind of point to bring up is how naturalistic actors in Hamaguchi movies tend to be. I think you could read that as a result of a lot of his films being ingrained in societal systems. There's a film comment review of Happy Hour that describes the four main characters as bourgeois, and I do think the subject matter of Happy Hour and other Hamaguchi films could be fit into a box that is, bourgeois fiction. The stories about the social maneuvering and problems that aren't less important but less material. The catalyst for the conflict of the story is these characters' husbands passively relying on structures that exist to the benefit of those husbands and to control the protagonists. And all of this kind of lends to the style of acting that we see in the movie and all of Hamaguchi's. Another explanation for the kind of style of acting, and we get a glimpse of it here in this performance, but it'll be a recurring theme as I move through the different movies. Acting, and specifically like stage acting and theatrical production, are ideas that Hamaguchi seems to plant in a lot of his movies. We get a glimpse of these sort of monologues that are kind of common, but Hamaguchi seems to really enjoy exploring this idea of the layers of performance. This actor in the film playing the character on screen who's performing in a play, or in the case of Happy Hour, it's the book reading. There's so many layers of performance and intent in the scene that it begins to feel really complex, but also really simple at the same time. It's interesting, and if you like that segment, there's so much more to dig into with his filmography in this respect. But yeah, that's really it. Not really a fireworks ending or all-encompassing conclusion. Again, I think the movie speaks for itself. You really don't need me to pick at this thing more than I already have. It's 5 hours long because it needs to be, you know? And this is the first in the series, and obviously the idea here is that the rewards get bigger the more you understand. So yeah, I mean, that's it for Happy Hour. I'm gonna do Asako 1 and 2 next whenever I get to it, so bye.